Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Saturday, January 23rd, Pope Francis releases his message for World Communications Day and says the Christian faith is transmitted by responding to Jesus' invitation to come and see. Churches in Northern Ireland and Portugal are shuttered as UK scientists warn a new COVID variant may be more deadly. And we shine the spotlight on the scourge of human trafficking which afflicts millions, most of whom are young women. In the Vatican, I'm Devin Watkins. Pope Francis today released his message for the 55th World Communications Day, which will be held on May 16th in most dioceses around the world. In this year's message, the Pope reflects on Jesus' invitation to come and see. As Christopher Wells reports, Pope Francis says first-hand experience is crucial to transmitting the faith and breaking out of the 24-hour news cycle.
The theme for this year's day, which takes place in May, is Come and See. Communicate by encountering people where and as they are. It recalls the gospel account of the first disciples' initial encounters with Jesus, who invited them to come and see, to enter into relationship with Him. This is how Christian faith begins and how it is communicated, as direct knowledge, born of experience, says Pope Francis. He explains that seeing things for oneself is the best way of getting at the truth of things and the most honest test of every message. In his message for World Communications Day, Pope Francis is sharply critical of a tendency to reduce news to prepackaged, self-referential sound bites, reflecting only the concerns and viewpoints of the powers that be. This can lead to a flow of information created in newsrooms, which does not accurately reflect reality on the ground. Instead, he says, we must hit the streets in order to see things that we otherwise would not know, to share knowledge that would otherwise not circulate, and to have encounters that otherwise would not take place. Journalists in particular, says Pope Francis, must be willing to go where no one goes, must have a desire to see things for themselves. He praised the courage of journalists who have faced grave risks to share the stories of those who are oppressed, of the sufferings of the poor and of creation, and of forgotten wars. Pope Francis notes that many situations today call for someone to come and see things as they really are. Too often, he says, we risk seeing things only through the eyes of the richer part of the world. This can lead to a divergence between the news we receive and what is really happening. Pope Francis also notes the importance of modern means of communication, especially the Internet. The Internet allows many more people to share their stories and to be witnesses of what they see and hear. At the same time, however, Pope Francis warns of the risk of misinformation being spread on social media, which has now become evident to everyone. The Internet is a powerful tool, the Pope says, which requires of us, both as producers and consumers of information, a great deal of prudence and responsible care for how we use it. Pope Francis emphasizes that in communications, nothing can ever completely replace seeing things in person. Some things can only be learned through first-hand experience. The message of Jesus was inseparable from the personal encounter with Him, the Pope says. Indeed, in Him, the incarnate Logos, the Word took on a face. The invisible God allowed Himself to be seen, heard, and touched. I'm Christopher Wells.
In other news, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned that the nation's new variant of the coronavirus may be associated with a higher level of mortality, according to early scientific evidence. Yet Mr. Johnson stressed that all the current evidence shows that the two vaccines being used in the country against COVID-19 are effective. From London, Susie Hodges reports.
It's the news about the new British variant of COVID-19 that nobody wanted to hear. This new variant was first discovered in southeast England last autumn and has quickly become the most prevalent form of the virus in the nation. It is already known to be up to 70% more transmissible than the original variant, but now there are suggestions it may be up to 30% more lethal. The government's chief scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance, stressed the evidence about mortality levels was not yet strong and said there was still great uncertainty around the data. He said once people reached hospital, there was no greater risk, but there were signs that people who had the British variant were at more risk overall. Vallance explained that for a man in his 60s, the average risk was that 10 in 1,000 people who got infected would be expected to die, but that this rose to roughly 13 or 14 people in 1,000 with the new variant. Scientists have reacted by urging tighter controls, and one said the news could take the country back to square one. It is also likely to increase the concerns of EU leaders, who were already considering strengthening border measures against the new British variant. The emergence of the new variant quickly led to travel bans across the world, but despite these measures, it has been found in at least 50 other nations. The Prime Minister warned of stricter travel curbs on Friday and continued lockdown measures, saying the nation's infection rate remains forbiddingly high. Britain has recorded more than 3.5 million COVID infections, and its death toll is approaching 100,000, the fifth highest in the world. The bright news amid the gloom is that the number of new infections in the nation was estimated to be shrinking by as much as 4% a day, and the rollout of the 2 vaccines is moving ahead swiftly. From London, this is Susie Hodges, reporting for Vatican News.
Separately, bishops in Northern Ireland and Portugal have suspended liturgical celebrations and pastoral activities in the presence of the faithful due to a resurgence of COVID-19 infections in those places. Lydia O'Kane has the story.
On Thursday, the devolved government of Northern Ireland took the unanimous decision to extend the current COVID-19 restrictions until Friday the 5th of March. It comes after Northern Ireland recorded its highest number of COVID-related deaths in the week up to January the 15th. As the spread of the virus continues unabated, doctors are warning that hospitals are being stretched to their limits. On Friday, 12 further deaths with COVID-19 were reported by the Northern Ireland Department of Health, bringing the death toll to 1,704. In light of the decision to extend restrictions, the bishops in Northern Ireland have decided that until March the 5th, masses will return online. In a statement issued on Friday, the bishops say that marriage, funeral, baptismal liturgies and drive-in services may continue, subject to strict safety guidelines and regulations. Arrangements for recording and or live streaming and making individual visits for private prayer are also permissible in accordance with regulations. Parishes are being encouraged where possible to continue to broadcast the celebration of Mass and other devotions and prayer services online and on other media. The bishops point out that once again they are making this decision reluctantly and are conscious of the pain that not being able to gather for public worship causes for all the faithful. They also continue to ask for prayers for the sick, the bereaved and all those whose livelihoods have been particularly impacted by the pandemic. In particular, their thoughts turn to all health workers, carers, chaplains and other essential workers. Elsewhere in Europe, liturgical celebrations and pastoral activities in the presence of the faithful are being suspended from Saturday in Portugal due to the resurgence of COVID-19 infections. The president of the Portuguese Bishops' Conference has called for active collaboration until the upward curve is reversed. According to health authorities, there are more than 151,000 active cases in Portugal and more than 9,600 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
In brief news, France's top health advisory body today recommended doubling the time between people being given the first and second COVID-19 vaccinations. They said increasing the time between jabs to 6 weeks from 3 would increase the number getting inoculated. The French health authority said the speed of infections and new variants mean more people need to be vaccinated as soon as possible. Bulgaria will ease some coronavirus restrictions from February 4th, though restaurants will remain closed due to concerns about the new coronavirus variant. The move follows measures put in place since late November that have tamed a surge in new infections. Bulgaria's prime minister said secondary school students will be allowed to attend classes under a special regime as of next month. Hong Kong's government locked down an area of Kowloon Peninsula on Saturday following a COVID-19 outbreak there. Some 10,000 residents must stay at home until they have been tested and their results returned. This is the first such measure since the city has taken since the pandemic began. Elsewhere, a cyclone hit Mozambique's coastal city of Beira on Saturday, but damage is reported to be fairly limited. Cyclone Eloise lost strength before making landfall and was downgraded to a tropical storm. Some cars were left underwater and several low-lying buildings collapsed. Peru was hit hard 2 years ago by Cyclone Idai, which killed more than 1,000 people across Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. And finally, on February 8th, the International Day of Prayer and Awareness Against Human Trafficking takes place. In preparation for the event, the Global Sisters Report recently organized a webinar featuring Sister Gabriela Bottani, the international coordinator of Talitha Kum. Her international network against trafficking in persons is sponsored by the International Union of Superiors General. Sister Gabriela joined the 350-odd participants of the webinar from Italy. In her speech, she highlighted the international reality of human trafficking and pointed out that it is a phenomenon which is complex and difficult to identify.
One of the main important issues that we need to consider if you want to try to identify and to recognize human trafficking is exploitation. This is a very important word. I used to say that it is the entry door to try to identify human trafficking in different contexts of vulnerability, of exploitation, and human rights violation. Because first of all, we may find different nuances in the way of trafficking and exploitation in different parts of the world, but we have always the dignity of the person is destroyed through exploitation and the limitation of freedom of the people. A deep and strong violation. So we may find, for example, a reality where trafficking is more at regional level, where people are recruited and exploited in a nearby area, and the form of exploitation may be different. We have domestic servitudes. We are working as Talitha Kum in these days with many cases of women that were trafficked from Africa to the Middle East or from Southeast Asia always to the Middle East or the Gulf countries, that they were trafficked for domestic servitude, and now they are no longer needed and they find themselves in very difficult situation. We have classic way we understand trafficking is trafficking for sexual exploitation, and we have different ways of exploiting in the prostitution, online sexual exploitation, and so on. Labor exploitation, forced labor, these are some elements. What we find as a common element is that women are most vulnerable to trafficking. We have about 70% of women victims of trafficking. And when we speak about sexual exploitation, we reach out 90% of the percentage of trafficked people. About 1 every 3 persons are under 18 years. So the exploitation is targeting younger generation and women.
Thanks there to Sister Gabriela Bottani, the international coordinator of Talitha Kum. That brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, go to our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. There you can also find all of our broadcasts in podcast form. And don't forget to catch the latest updates on our Facebook page and Twitter feed. In the Vatican, I'm Devin Watkins.